We're going to get started. Welcome to this session on the role of socio-cultural factors in closing the digital gender gap. As well as those in the room with us here in New York, the session is being webcast and the recording will be available afterwards also on webtv.un.org as well as on the UN's YouTube channel. Thank you so much all for joining us, those in the room and those who are with us virtually. In many settings, governments, businesses and others have expressed their strong commitment to closing the digital gender gap. And here at the UN, one can see this, for example, in UN resolutions such as on ICT for sustainable development and on science, technology, innovation for sustainable development, to name just two of them. There are others as well. Notwithstanding all this level of commitment, the latest statistics from the ITU Facts and Figures 2019, out just a couple of months ago, show that the proportion of women using the internet globally is 48%, compared with 58% of men. And in relative terms, this means that the global internet user gap is 17%. In developing countries, the digital gender divide is wider and growing faster. The NGO Girl Effect came out last year with a report that showed, as far as teenage girls are concerned, in developing countries, they were very much less likely than teenage boys to own a mobile phone. And they highlighted the impacts of this for their digital literacy and even for their safety online because of the kinds of socio-cultural factors that we will discuss in this session this afternoon, impacting their access and use of technology. Social cultural factors also have impacts for women and girls on opportunities to acquire digital skills and in the workplace and in tech entrepreneurship. It's critical to navigate and address such factors in ICT for the Sustainable Development Goals and women and girls empowerment projects and initiatives if such efforts are to be successful. So this session is going to look at the why and also importantly the how from a range of angles, and we're so delighted to have this fantastic, terrific multi-stakeholder panel to do just that. We have one participant one speaker who's remotely from GSMA, and I'm going to at this point introduce our panel, and around the room you have the bios of this terrific crew that we've assembled today. Here we have Dr. Revi Sterling. She's the Director of USAID WGDP Women Connect. And here we have Lisa Orts, Development Officer, Pro Mujer. Remotely we have Diana Spehar, Advocacy Manager for Connect Women, GSMA. And then over here we have Ingrid Sanchez Tapia, Education Specialist, Gender Equality and Secondary Education, UNICEF. And last but definitely not least, holding up the line for the male half of the species is Dan Seymour. Thank you so much, Dan, for being a male champion of change, Director for UN Women's Strategic Partnership Division. My name is Ursula Weinhoven, and I'm really delighted to be your moderator this afternoon for this session. I'm the representative to the UN for the ITU. And I'm so pleased, as I said, to have this wonderful session that we've got for you today. The ITU, as the UN's specialised agency for information and communication technologies, for us, digital inclusion is absolutely critical to our mission, which is to connect everyone everywhere, regardless of their means. And digital inclusion is also one of our overarching strategic objectives. So we're very passionate about understanding all the different myriad factors that are at play which have an impact on getting everybody connected. And one set of those factors is socio-cultural factors that we'll be discussing today. Lastly, I would just add that this event today is also in support of the Equals Global Partnership on Gender Equality in the Digital Age. ITU is one of the proud co-founders, along with a number of organisations who are speaking this afternoon. This partnership brings together organisations of all types to share, learn and collaborate for gender equality in ICT access, skills, leadership and research. And we invite you to visit equals.org to learn more about the work of the coalitions of this partnership in these areas. And we will shortly hear from GSMA, who's actually leading on the Equals Access Coalition, about the important work that they've been doing in this area. Just to end with a very tiny anecdote, when Equals first started, it debated a slogan, "Technology has no gender." And while that was catchy, partners felt that technology is not, unfortunately, gender neutral, and that's part of the challenge that needs to be addressed if we're to close these gender digital divides so that all can benefit from the huge potential that ICT offers, as well as to effectively tackle the associated risks. So with that introduction, it is my honour to hand over to Dr. Revi Sterling, as I said, the Director of USAID WGDP, Women Connect.
Hold on. Oh, probably shouldn't touch this.
Your slides disappeared? Okay.
My slides are gone because I probably did something terrible.
There we go. Yay! Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here this afternoon. It's actually really an honor to be here with the other stakeholders and the people doing things in the room. Pro Mujer, doing such amazing work. Ursula, I'm such a fan of yours and what ITU and Equals are doing, and it's great to meet new people in this space. Also, for everybody that's here, you're obviously here because you care, which means you can help close the gender digital divide in your own way. So I'm thrilled to have you here. It seems so odd. Oh, I only have 8 minutes, so here, that didn't count. I'm going to time myself so I don't go anything over. There's two forces that I believe are sort of the biggest forces we have in development, right? There's women, and we know that empowering women, is kind of, a stalwart key to sustainable development the world over. And then there's technology, which, is such a powerful amplifying tool, and yet the two don't work well at all together for the most part. The gender digital divide continues to grow, and that surprises probably not you, but many, many people I talk to, even in our international development and international relations world, because they see that, because of efforts like GSMA, broadband prices are more affordable, mobiles are more affordable, efforts like ITU Equals, showing that there's, just down in the next town over, there's a training you can take. So it seems anathema that there would be this growing gender digital divide. But as we look at the world and its state today, it's kind of easy to actually see that empowered women remain even more so terrifying today than maybe even yesterday. And for some reason, the world is just terrified of empowered women. And as you have more and more international development sectors turning towards digital mechanisms and digital development strategies to improve their reach, to improve their scalability, their sustainability, this is actually a huge crisis. In the past, if there was a gender digital divide, it just meant a woman couldn't look at couldn't get on a phone. Now it means you can't access that phone to get that health information, that agricultural information, that economic growth information, even though these sectors are putting so much money into digital development, and yet you have this growing gender gap. So really bad, unequal equation that we really need to fix. We've kind of known about this since I love quoting Conway's law. He was a computer scientist. In 1967, Conway stated that technology, especially software, was always imbued by the values of the creator of that software. So technology can't be gendered. And if you look at this, if you've read the wonderful book Invisible Women that just came out, if you look at the history of AI and machine learning and everything from airbags to pharmaceutical trials, you'll see that women and men are treated very, very differently. That this idea of being gender blind actually increases gender divides around the world. And yet this still seems to be mostly unrecognized, because we want to be gender blind and race blind and color blind, all these things. Blind is just bad. You don't want to be blind in these social arenas.
Unless you're actually blind.
But that's what's in the social arenas. Yes, I was trying. That was me trying to not be politically incorrect. Yes. Thank you. But let's say, and I talk to a lot of people that say, but I see women with cell phones. My maid has a cell phone, or I've been in this poor slum and everybody had phones. And yeah, the women who can have phones, there are poor, empowered women who do have phones, who have the means to, to be able to buy the airtime, to be able to buy the phone, who have the support from their family structure to have one. But I've got projects around the world where in the 8,000 women we're working with, 40% have feature phones. And of that, less than 1% had smartphones. And this is not that far off the beaten track. This is just up in northern Mozambique. So the fact is that as soon as we get a further bit away from our missions, our bureaus, our subsidiaries, this gender digital divide becomes much more evident. Women are still mostly offline because somebody in their community, their family, their household wants them to be offline. Again, this goes back to that, terrifying truth of the empowered woman. All right, just threw some gloom and doom stats up there. Now it gets better. For those of you that are doing digital development, I think the biggest question to ask is, who isn't showing up at your training? You might have a room full of women that are there for ICT and digital literacy, digital financial literacy. I mean, there's tons of programs. This is what we do. We do hackathons and codathons and all these kind of things. Okay, what about the women that aren't there? The ones that are there are empowered enough to be there. So what about the ones that aren't there? Why aren't they there? Under what condition could those women and girls even use ICT and access the internet? A lot of the projects I work on are just based on understanding those in power, those that run the sort of, the structure, the status quo in a community. What are they so afraid of? Let's get to the root of that. Because if we can really discuss that and look at the social norms, unpack them, and then start building compelling user cases that address those fears and also show that there are ways of being safer online, of having more fruitful interactions through hardware, through software, through policy, through user behavior and training, that actually the internet can be an incredibly empowering place, not just for women and girls, but for the family unit, for the community. So, but we have to build that user case in, and we have to understand the underlying fears and concerns. In a lot of cases, what I think is really exciting is that technology has sort of an empowerment piece inherent to it, and the fact that, if I'm using a phone, it means that I am able to do something. There is some agency built into just that action. So in places where there's been, some of the projects we work on in four countries are bringing electricity and internet to communities for the first time ever, but the women are bringing them. They've been trained as the network engineers. They're there to stand up the network. So they're bringing in internet for the first time ever to communities, and there is no gender norm to go against because there hasn't been this kind of utility in the past. And we're creating new norms through technology, and I think that's a very exciting space to work in as well. But again and again, we have to meet the women where they're at. We have to understand that the factors in their life, illiteracy, low confidence, low self-efficacy, family members that don't want them to be involved, in information receiving and dissemination. That's what we really need to focus in on. Just also remembering that social norms are always at the core of what we're looking at with this. And I've talked about that quite a bit, but we need to take pages from the fact that there's been gender and development orgs that have been working in this space of social norms and new technologies, not necessarily digital technologies, but for other technologies for years and decades. We've got to take a page from the orgs that are doing really good work in this space, that have already looked at girls' education, that have looked at FGM, that have looked at other things, because as technologists, and I'm a computer scientist by background, we think we code our way out of anything and don't even look at the fact that there was this whole history of international development before digital development. Who knew? Not only creating new social norms, but engaging a lot in the dignity of the design. One of the digital principles, of course, is to, design with the end user. Well, if the end user isn't at your, design co-creation workshop, that's going to be very difficult. And working with women that once they understand what you're trying to do and they say, actually, I need something to put the phone in. I need it to be in my waist pocket, so that button can't be there. That technology can't be there. It has to be a shared technology. It has to be this. We have to treat the people that are using our phones and our technologies and our one-off devices and our custom hardware and services like the actual users that they are. Not charity cases, not future customers. There's definitely a lot in the middle. And we have to gear up for a hard sell. Talking about gender norms in the digital divide space is a bit difficult, because even as in global north technology firms, and I come from a software background, we have a lot of gendered issues in our own communities, in our own spaces. I mean, that's kind of where a lot of the Me Too movement has erupted for better. The other thing I think we struggle with when we're working at gender digital divide issues is people say, you got to really dumb down your software. This is for illiterate women. This is for women that don't, oh, shoot, okay, I'll wrap it up. This is for women that don't have any, they don't have any formal training. They don't have any confidence. Well, that's actually a really exciting technical research agenda for us, because doing technology at the margins of society means you get to push the margins of technology. And that actually enables technology to be a lot better. Watching some of the technology transfer from south to north, Ushahidi, the BRIC, other policies, Fab Labs, et cetera, is showing that when you are working in constraints, and the rest of the world is also facing those constraints, we can make some really, really exciting technologies happen. These are just some I'll put up there. Probably the one I most espouse is text-free user interfaces and alternative input methods for people that speak unwritten languages like Bambara or Wolof, or who are illiterate on top of that. So we're using much more rich voice stuff. I mean, that's going to help all the natural language processing that we're all using. And then my very last slide, because I'm gone over now, is just to keep going back to the fact that we've got to look at the gender digital divide in all of its nuances as we look to digitize all of the development sectors. This is key, this is important. Even within my own organization and several of the ones I partner with, there's a lot of pushback that says, well, we're the gender people, that's for the technology people to do. No, we have to do it together, and if we don't do it in tandem, it's never gonna get done, and we're gonna grow this gap. And I'm sorry, unequal development isn't development at all.
Thanks so much, Revi. And I should have mentioned that if I understand correctly, you're such a pioneer that didn't you create the first ever gender technology and development graduate program?
Well, gender's always a part of what I do, but no, I did create the first standalone ICT for development master's program back at University of Colorado. But
very, very
now
cool.
I'm in DC with the Women Connect program, which is even more exciting.
Well, we look forward to hearing more about that in this session. It was a beautiful framing. Thank you so much. So now we're going to turn to this side to Lisa Orts from Pro Mujer, where she's a development officer. Lisa?
Thank you so much, Ursula.
Oh, you just press this button here.
Wonderful.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ursula, and it's a pleasure to be here, especially with such amazing colleagues in this industry. I really appreciate Revi for your perspective, because I think you give a nice overview on the statistics and the understanding of where we are in the digital divide. And I'm here working from Pro Mujer, where we're coming from more of a on-the-grounds perspective. So, and a lot of what we're finding is actually meeting exactly what you're saying in terms of the statistics on why women are having these barriers to entry into digital technology space. So for all of you who don't know what Pro Mujer is an organization in Latin America. We're one of the leading organizations for women's empowerment in Latin America. We serve in 5 different countries in the region, and we're expanding into a 6th. So, and we're serving 250,000 women each year with bundled services in financial loans, as well as education and healthcare. So Pro Mujer has been around for 30 years now, and we sort of pioneered the idea of bundling microloans with healthcare, and have traditionally always had a very holistic approach to how we service the women in the field. I want to speak specifically about a program we have in Bolivia called Mujeres Online, which just launched this year. We made a partnership with Cisco Networking Academy as well as Women Speed Up. And this allowed us to create a scholarship program for 120,000 women in Bolivia, and this is the number we want to reach in 3 years. So far, we've reached 15,000 women. And this scholarship program is really important because it allows women to take their micro enterprises to the next level. So most of the women we service are micro entrepreneurs, artisans, running their own restaurants, really empowered women in the community who are taking care of their families. And so this allows them to understand how can they utilize technology to take their business to the next level. Things like publishing about their business online on social media? How do they create more targeted marketing about their businesses? How do they create digital materials about their businesses and managing their business as well in terms of the finances? So we partnered with Cisco to create a entrepreneurship course, which is from their Get Connected course catalog. And there, women are really able to get hands-on experience with technology. Now, pointing to one of the barriers, 2% of the women we service have an email. So 2% of the women don't have an email, and you need an email in order to log in and sign up for the course for Cisco. So this was a huge barrier where we actually had to create an initiative to support women in getting and creating emails in order to then sign on to the course. So this is kind of gives you an idea of really the level of gap that we're talking about. And I think there's a lot of discussion, in the developed world about, okay, we need to get women into code. We need to get women into these really advanced, honestly, stages of technology where there's really this gap in understanding what are the realities of the literacy levels of women on the grounds. So I think that needs to just be heard more and more, that it's a different, we're dealing with a different level of literacy. And therefore, one of the ways that we also tackled that is that we divided women into two groups, one being women who were a little bit more digitally literate, whereas the other group was women who needed a little bit extra support in terms of getting the email, getting themselves familiar with just using technology at a higher level. So there's still these level of fears, though, that a lot of women feel in just being able to be a technology user. So if we're talking about the stats of women and the digital divide, the stats are actually a lot larger in Latin America. 31 million women do not have a mobile device. 76 million women do not use mobile internet. So even in the cases when a woman has a mobile device, maybe she's not actually going online or researching things. She's using it to communicate and socialize. And we found that on the grounds, a lot of our clients are really interested in using, mobile technology to socialize and build community. So we try and take that and empower the women, and we have a complete 100% female staff. And so the female staff encourage women to kind of go beyond the fears that they naturally would have towards technology. So this is one of the biggest strongholds about ProMujer. We've been working for 30 years in the field. We have nearly 100% women staffed. So we're able to create and build from the communities that we have in our centers, where we have these bundled services of finance and healthcare, and take that to discuss what are the biggest barriers women are facing, and see how we can kind of shift the narrative on the stereotypes that maybe are holding women back. I would say, in addition to that, childcare is one of the other largest barriers that we found on the ground. So we're really trying to look at innovative ways of partnering with other organizations, alliances, partnerships, on how we can take care of childcare and that specific practical need of the women that we serve. Another way that we adjust our programs is that we make it very flexible in order for women to meet their own schedules. So they sort of design the program themselves in terms of how often can they come during the week. Can they come, 3 times during the week, or maybe it's better to just go on the weekends, or evenings has been really proven to be successful too. So we try and make a flexible program in order for women to attend at, the most convenient times for them. I think those are really sort of I don't want to, run too over time, but those are the main barriers that we found, and sort of the main ways that we've tried to create and innovate on solutions to address that. We're 15,000 women, but we want to reach 120,000 women, which is currently the number of women we serve in total in Bolivia. And we're right now in Santa Cruz, and we're also in, I believe, El Alto. So we're in Santa Cruz and we're in El Alto, and we want to expand to all of our operations in Bolivia, as well as expand it to women in the community and family members as well. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Some really valuable learnings and strategies there to address these kinds of issues and help ensure that we get many more women entrepreneurs connected and leveraging technology for themselves, their families and communities. Now we're going to go to Diana Spahar. Are you there, Diana?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone.
Hello. As I mentioned before, Diana is the Advocacy Manager for Connect Women, GSMA, and also GSMA is the leader of the Equal Access Coalition. And we have your slides, Diana, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Ursula. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening from London. Thank you very much, Ursula, Revi, and Lisa, for your wonderful presentations. I think it's always inspiring to hear about what other colleagues are doing, as well as to hear that actually we seem to be arriving at very similar conclusions. So as Ursula kindly introduced, I'm the Advocacy Manager in Connected Women team at GSMA, and the topic of digital gender divide is actually quite close to our heart here at GSMA. As the Association of Mobile Operators, we tend to have a lot of data on the kind of what operators do and what is the percentage of their female customers. And what we found was that across low and middle income countries, there's a gender gap in phone ownership of 10%, and it gets larger when we talk about the gender gap in mobile internet. So specifically, we found that it currently stands at 23% across low and middle income countries, excluding almost 300 million women. And if we start talking about advanced use cases, the gap only increases further. But today I'll take off my GSMA hat and I will talk about the work that Equals Access Coalition has done in producing a report called Lessons Learned in Closing the Gender Gap in Internet Access and Usage. So luckily, Ursula has already presented a bit of background on Equals Partnership. And what's quite fascinating, I would have to say, about Equals Partnership is just how diverse it is. Our members vary from international organizations, public sector NGOs, to private companies. And specifically, Access Coalition is focused on reducing the gender gap in internet access and usage, as you could have inferred from the title. But our members, given that they work across different geographies, have a really diverse perspective on interdisciplinary topics such as bridging the digital gender divide and sociocultural norms. And we've used that diverse perspective and we fed it into a lessons learned report, which was really a collaborative effort of 7 different members. And I'm going to spell them out because I think they deserve that. So we've had Association of Progressive Communication, Digital Opportunity Trust, GSMA, Internet Society, Pro Mujer, Trickle Up, and World Bank Digital Development Partnership, providing us with examples of how they managed to address sociocultural factors during the implementation of their projects aimed at increasing access to and use of internet. I would say one of the lessons that we all agreed on very early on in the process is just how important social norms are in actually protecting women's access to and use of mobile technology. And while there is a host of ways in which sociocultural barriers tend to evidence themselves, our members were particularly alert to a few issues, as you can see on the next slide, particularly social attitudes. So very high level, speaking of issues such as family disapproval of phone usage, or the fact that women wouldn't feel comfortable working in a mixed gender classroom type environment. We've also identified the kind of time constraints associated with learning new technologies, especially given that in a lot of our markets, women have to juggle so many social roles. The fact that a lot of content available online does not seem to be perceived as engaging or speaking to women. The fact that actually getting onto the internet can be can feel unsafe and insecure, both in terms of physical access as well as the online presence. And finally, we found that in a lot of digital training programs, women seem to be lacking confidence in their ability to learn and acquire new skills. And finally, any kind of social norm discussion really has to tie back to the structural inequalities that really talk about the difference in the levels of education and income standards that end up determining the basic level of digital literacy. So over the next 5 to 6 minutes, what I would like to do is share with you what we've learned about addressing those challenges, as well as share some examples of how our members are practically tackling them. So to go into barrier number one, what we found is that social attitudes such as, resistance towards learning in a mixed gender environment tends to really prevent the efficacy of different digital literacy programs. And the research conducted by APC really reinforced the need for having gender-separate classes and female local trainers. So this is the strategy that some of the Equals partners then took on board. And specifically in Nigeria and Rwanda, the Digital Opportunity Trust introduced community during their outreach phase. They've started training women in women-only cohort. And as the project continued, they tend to introduce continuous learning. And we found that actually these 3 initiatives have led to early evidence of positive impact in bringing more women online. The second sociocultural barrier that we identified related to time constraints, and specifically the fact that women really struggle when they try to introduce any kind of digital skills training into their diaries. And really what we learned from that is the importance of introducing female-centered design in designing initiatives, and particularly the phases of recruitment and retention. And how we went about addressing that is looking into introducing flexible training schedules. And I'm sure even in the developed world, being able to provide facilities such as daycare would go a long way towards actually ensuring that women do have the time and the space to actually take on any kind of learning, not just digital literacy skills. The RDEP initiative also introduced flexible hours, and they made sure to provide training in locations that were basically convenient for their attendees. And again, that seemed to have had a huge impact on the uptake of the course by our intended women participants. A really interesting example, and potentially one of my favorite ones, relates to the kind of addressing the frustration that a lot of the women expressed, and it relates to the lack of relevant content. So that's our barrier number 3. And what we found is it's actually a twofold issue. One is that oftentimes the content doesn't seem to be available in the local languages, or it's not really addressed to and translated for populations with different levels of literacy. But we also found that sometimes the content just doesn't speak to women, it's not engaging enough. And so that realization prompted different Equals members to design content that is adapted and translation for population, even if it has to, mean finding a way to translate language into a tribal language. And for example, with the Smart Saki initiative rolled out by Trickle Up, they have actually managed to have a positive impact on social norms by changing the status women had in the household. So by actually enabling women to become a point of contact and a go-to person for topics of agricultural techniques, they have actually managed to change their role from being a content consumer to actually being a point of contact and a go-to person for, as I said, lots of different relevant topics. Another applications which we found worked quite well is including mentorship and soft skills training into digital skills curricula, as well as what the World Bank attempted to do in Nigeria to kind of find those skills that would make that transition from being a digital consumer to actual digital creator more smooth and actually quite natural. The last sociocultural barrier that we have identified and that I would like to talk to you today relates to safety and security as women try and access the internet. And the interesting thing is, whilst a lot of us are aware of different harassment issues and of a lot of negative effects that come with the advent of internet and broader, mobile internet technology, actually we also found that lack of infrastructure such as public lives and safe roads are impeding women from accessing. And so what we looked at are different initiatives that, for example, mobile operators are doing in actually ensuring that the technology is safer for women. So one of the examples would be the Vodafone Saki initiative launched last year, where in India, the operator added a few features to their existing service, such as emergency alerts, emergency balance and private recharge. And they have found that actually not only did the number of customers skyrocket to millions, but they also found that the feedback they received for that service, meant that for women, the safety aspect of technology is one of the key considerations. Another good example would be the education and awareness initiative that RDEP rolled out when it came to actually educating women on how to feel safer and what data privacy principles they can adopt when online. As you can imagine, there's a host of learning we can talk about when we try and see how digital literacy trainings relate to social norms. I've highlighted a few of them, and I would urge you to have a look at our report, which is accessible at Equals and GSMA website. I would like to finish off for today, but obviously very happy to answer any questions on these examples. And I look forward to being able to discuss this in more detail.
Thank you so much, Diana. So exciting, this work, and love that it involves so many different organisations bringing their expertise and lessons. And I think the way you've organised this report is really helpful too, very, very, very concrete. So we're now going to turn to UNICEF, to Ingrid Sanchez-Tapia, who I mentioned is Education Specialist, Gender Equality and Secondary Education. Ingrid, over to you. I think we're just pulling up your slides.
Good. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit to include children and adolescents. As we can see, and as other panelists have perfectly illustrated, there's a gender gap in access to digital technologies, information online, and this gap starts quite early during childhood and adolescence. As this figure illustrates, the gap is particularly striking in low-income countries. This gender-digital divide is proving very difficult to overcome, since it is rooted in gender norms that are unfair, and overall they reflect gender inequalities in nations and communities. So this is kind of the tip of the iceberg, really. So gender norms play a crucial role in limiting girl access to digital platforms. Both girls and boys receive messages directly and indirectly about what they can do, what they can aspire to, the kind of technologies, platforms that they can or cannot use, how they can use them. These messages and expectations present problems, hurdles to their access. So there's one interesting study from 2017 that presents evidence on how even when families have access to digital technologies and caregivers provide that technology, the way it is allowed or is facilitated for girls and boys is quite different. Girls get access to technologies at an older age. They are more curtailed or monitored or limited in how they can use those technologies and what information they can access. And the ideas and the aspirations that adolescents develop, boys and girls, about careers in ICT or STEM are quite different, with girls' outlook being less positive than that of boys. So as we see, gender norms are there, present, start early. They are incredibly difficult to overcome because they are, at the same time that they are pervasive, they are invisible. and they are interwoven in everything we do and the expectations we have. So changing these gender norms requires coordinated collective action, because this requires to change behaviors and mindsets at scale, not just those of us interested in this area preaching to the choir, but everyone needs to be involved. So I would like in these minutes to present a few examples from the work that UNICEF is doing in this area, trying to shift gender norms for adolescent girls and boys using digital platforms. These four examples are the partnership of UNICEF and Girl Effect, Ni Nyapinga in Rwanda, changing gender norms at scale, learning languages through digital platforms for refugee children in Greece, Mauritania, and Lebanon. Oki, the period tracker app developed by our colleagues in East Asia Pacific, and the partnership with the DOT in Lebanon using digital skills for accessing the workforce for young women. So the first example, Ni Nyapinga, is let me check here. Ni Nyapinga, it means in Kinyarwanda, a beautiful girl inside and out who makes wise decisions. So this is a brand that has reached national scale in Rwanda, inspiring girls to fulfill their potential. This brand seeks to create a new normal for girls, where society in general perceives girls as educated, healthy, safe, and economically empowered. This brand has reached so far 80% of Rwandans, so that's about 6.6 million people. And through the use of digital channels, Ni Nyapinga has been able to influence not only behavioral change at scale, but policy, educational policy, and research. Ni Nyapinga is measuring shifts in knowledge, attitudes, behaviors, and how those are reflected into shifts in social norms in relation to girls' value, voice, and connections. Something that is very interesting about this work is that this initiative understands that a girls' voice in education or health could be quite different, and that the barriers for girls to access information in the realm of education or health is very different as well. So they have tailored their messages and strategies, and they are leveraging not only from digital technologies, but hand in hand with radio, print media, SMS, digital channels, so that they can reach everyone. Another example, as I said, is digital platforms to support the language learning for refugee children. UNICEF, in collaboration with Achilles, private sector company, it's trying to provide children from refugee settings with opportunities to learn Greek language, French language, and English language. This is key for refugee children to access education services and become integrated into the host communities. The results of the work in Greece have demonstrated that when girls are given the opportunity to learn and use digital technologies, they really take this opportunity seriously, and they take advantage of it. In all the dimensions that are measured in this program, girls have outperformed boys in listening, in speaking, in writing, in reading. So this has contributed to setting a new normal in these communities, where girls are seen as capable and where the use of digital technologies by girls has been valued and seen in a different light. And again, all this is related to the change in gender norms. One more example is Oki, the digital app for girls to track their menstrual periods. One advantage of using digital tools by adolescent girls is accessing sensitive information that is essential for their health and other life outcomes. In many areas of the world, as you know, menstruation continues to be taboo. And in this context, girls lack information and are still shamed and penalized for having periods. Menstrual health and hygiene programs exist in many places, but are still paper-based, where top-down information is delivered to girls in ways that are sometimes not age-appropriate, and by staff or teachers or adults who don't have adequate tools to engage girls. So designing an app, becoming engaged in designing this app in a girl-centered design manner, not only allows girls to access this information, but to develop skills in STEM that are most useful for them. The final example that I want to present here is from UNICEF Lebanon, where the Generation on Innovation Leaders program provides young women and men with 1 month of intensive entrepreneurship training to develop entrepreneurial, digital, and transferable skills that they can, so that they can craft innovative solutions for problems in their communities. This program has partnered with the DOT Lebanon to create a digital freelance job sourcing platform called BOT, Bridge, Outsource, Transform. These types of initiatives are particularly beneficial for young women because they can find an avenue to develop digital skills and put them into practice and access decent work. So BOT provides high quality digital services executed by skilled freelancers, many of them young women from marginalized communities, contributing to their economic empowerment. So to wrap up, there are potentially serious consequences of excluding girls from the digital age. Girls may be unable to access online services about information, including about issues related to their health, sexuality, such as HIV and puberty. They may face barriers to furthering their education and to develop the skills necessary in the global economy of today. They may not be able to access social and political information that affects them, and they may be excluded from opportunities to make their voices be heard. Hurdles to access, affordability, lack of education, as well as inherent biases and sociocultural norms curtail women and girls' ability to benefit from the opportunities offered by the digital transformation. Girls have, as we know, relatively lower engagement and enrollment in STEM and ICT disciplines, which coupled with limited access to online tools and digital tools, it's only leading to wider gender gaps in their access. So a few recommendations to end. Concrete policy actions are needed to foster women's and girls' full participation and inclusion in the digital economy, while at the same time addressing stereotypes and social norms that lead to discrimination against women in these digital spaces. Governments may consider raising awareness on gender discrimination, facilitating women's and girls' access to ICT and STEM, through community building, financing, networking, and providing scholarships, foster IT literacy among marginalized girls and women linked to employability initiatives, deconstructing stereotypes about men being better able at digital technologies, mentoring and increasing female role models in education, in digital education, economy, and STEM. I cannot emphasize enough that education is one of the most powerful tools that policymakers may leverage to bridge the digital gender divide. So we, all of us, can collectively act and advocate to equip women and girls with the skills needed to participate and thrive in the digital world. we need to make sure that everyone becomes aware about the benefits of girls and women using digital tools, and that we tailor these messages and we take advantage of digital and social media platforms to target the specific cohort users and customize messages so that we become more effective at reaching leaders, communities, and we achieve a transformation in gender norms. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ingrid, and it's just so terrific also to have you part of the panel to help emphasise how important these issues are also for girls and young women. And once again, more wonderful examples, and I'm just really loving how all the speakers are bringing forward great examples and strategies that really work to have initiatives that will make a difference and close the gap. And I loved how you said it's about setting a new normal about girls and women in tech. And I think that's really actually a great segue to Dan Seymour from UN Women Director for Strategic Partnership Division, because I think you might also tell us about the Unstereotype Alliance, right? And also another key strategy which we haven't yet talked about is how important it is to for taking account of social cultural factors is engaging men. So let's engage a man now. Thanks, Dan.
Well, so I should say I'm actually here both for UN Women, but I'm also, I chair the management group for something called the Unstereotype Alliance, which we'll talk about, and I'm here representing the Alliance as well. I work in an 83% female environment, so I don't even notice being in the minority anymore, but I'm very, very happy to be here. So we have, I think, like you were saying, actually, there's a nice segue going on. You know, we've talked about how norms and beliefs and stereotypes are a massive driver for the reality that women and girls face in general, but also including specifically on this topic of access to technology. And we talked a little bit about what needs to be done. And I think, Isabel, towards the end, you were talking about how important it is that the media and the things that we see and consume every day are actually helping challenge these norms and stereotypes, not perpetuating them. So it's in that context that I'm here to talk about the Unstereotype Alliance, and maybe an area. So I don't want to go over again, you know, what other panelists have extremely deftly said, how important it is to try and change some of these attitudes for the better. What I do want to talk about is a way of doing it which maybe is less familiar, which is leveraging the power of the marketing and communications industry. Now, I think when we talk about media, most of us think about TV, movies, that, you know, what we might see, music videos and so on. But actually, all of us, you know, since you've left your house this morning, you've probably seen, well, but by the time you get home, you'll probably seen between 75 and 400 adverts of some variety, whether they were what we call OOH, out of home, they were plastered on a wall or inside your subway car, or they were on your Facebook feed, or they were on the side of a packaging that is out there in the Vienna Cafe, whatever it is. And all of those ads have been specifically designed by people who make a living trying to change your mind. They make a living trying to get you to buy one thing instead of another thing, do different things with your money or behave in different ways. So there's an enormous power in that industry when we start talking about this job of changing minds. And also, I think we have to recognize, I don't know how many of you are from inside the UN family, but I'm sure many of you work either in the UN or similar sorts of organizations. We're not actually very good at changing attitudes, right? We've done, I think, some things around HIV, for example. UNICEF's done great things getting people to wash their hands and other such things. I worked for UNICEF in Vietnam. We were quite good at getting people not to touch sick-looking chickens during avian influenza. But on the whole, it's not our specialization, right? So we have been looking and working with the marketing and communications industry in partnership to figure out, well, what can we do to change minds effectively around stereotypes, gendered roles of the kinds that are driving this digital divide. When we look at, okay, so what does that mean? Well, one of the immediate issues that we have is, well, okay, do we understand what's actually in people's heads already? That's a big task. You know, what exactly, when we say, well, okay, there are these norms and these attitudes that are unhelpful, well, what exactly? So there's two questions that we've been able to ask through the Unstereotype Alliance. One is, what are people thinking in general? And two is, what do you see in adverts and in advertising marketing that could be driving things? So For example, as an example of the way that the industry can be very helpful to us, we did with a company called Kantar, and if you've had any exposure to the marketing communications industry, you'll know Kantar. They're an enormous marketing analytics and research company and branding as well. And they undertook a 10-market study with us, or a 10-country study, looking at attitudes. And in that study, they found, for example, that 41% of the respondents asked said that when a mother works for pay, that hurts her children. So almost a half of respondents thought that a working mother was a bad thing because it hurts kids. We also found things like, for example, a quarter of men thought that under certain circumstances hitting your spouse was acceptable and okay. I mean, there's all sorts of useful information that can drive our work on gender equality in multiple areas. So that's an example of the way that industry can help us get a sense of, okay, what are people thinking about gender roles? But also within our membership, we've done a lot of work looking at what exactly is advertising telling us. So female characters were only present. I mean, just give you some data points from some of the research that we've done across our membership. When you look at business, industrial, automotive type ads, women are only in them about a third of the time. Similarly, ads that relate to education or government roles, predominantly about 2/3 of the people that you see on the screen or in the ad are male. Where you see a predominance of women is on consumer goods, retail goods. So women are the ones with the nappies or diapers in this country, opening the packet of ready-made gravy mix or something. So already in ads, you can see the ads have been perpetuating this. In fact, when people were asked, they said that about 50% of ads featured outdated female stereotypes. When you looked at what women did in ads, only about 3% of the women in ads were in aspirational or leadership positions. 75% of the people who were in ads where they were shown having a job or working were male. And men were 62% more likely to be shown as clever in an ad. So this is like really unhelpful stuff that we need to challenge. And by the way, I do want to say, these figures are averages, right? But there are some extremes, at the end there. Just a couple of months ago, we had to act, and quite aggressively, a company in Belgium, which is hardly where your mind goes to as a sort of hotbed of global misogyny. A company called Bicky Burger produced an ad which showed a man punching a woman for bringing him a burger that was not a Bicky Burger. And the membership of the Alliance moved very swiftly to condemn it. The ad was very quickly withdrawn. The company, I think, has taken a major stock price hit. But this actually, happens. So I'm quite passionate about this. So apologies if I get carried away talking about how important this is. But now, in 2017, we pulled together a number of actors in the industry to try to change minds. And we now have 42 members. We have in the three big pillars of the industry, we have Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, Mars, and so on, who buy the ads. We have IPG and WPP, who make the ads. We have Google, Twitter, Facebook, who put the ads out, right? And so it's a really important coalition. In addition, we've had chapters. Actually, today we launched the Turkey chapter. That was our most recent national chapter. We have the Brazil chapter, others on the way, all working to try and make sure in their markets, in their countries, that this kind of portrayal of women and girls, including with regard to technology, changes. One of the things that we've done as an example, if you work in advertising, what you aspire to most in the world is to win a Lion Award at the Cannes Festival. And the Cannes Festival, but also Spikes Asia, Dubai Links, and other judging around the world, you can't win a prize now for your advert if you don't meet what are called the unstereotyped criteria. These are new criteria from a year ago that basically say that anything being considered for a prize cannot be promoting sexist stereotypes and norms and so on. So really, I'm here just to say that as UN Women, but also as the Unstereotype Alliance, we're very, there we go, not too bad. We're extremely committed to this issue. My executive director is deeply passionate about it. The collaboration that we have with many others, UNICEF is an Unstereotype Alliance member as well. We value this greatly. But just to say, we really are very open and ready to talk about the ways in which we can collaborate with partners to leverage this coalition in this very influential industry towards addressing the norms and the sociocultural factors that have driven the digital divide. So I'm really here just to share this as an opportunity and to tell you and the colleagues working in this area that the door is open. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dan. I think this is so exciting, and I think as we know, particularly in the area of technology, there are certain kind of pervasive images and stereotypes about, for instance, who is a leader in tech or who is a technologist and who uses tech. And so I think these kinds of techniques and strategies and engagement of stakeholders that you have is just super exciting. And I would just love to say, I think Equals would love to see how might there be a kind of project or initiative of the Unstereotype Alliance, which maybe, as you say, gets at the heart of some of these stereotypes. And there's a wonderful quote from Melinda Gates, which is, "Not every great idea comes wrapped in a hoodie." And so I think that if we can also use some of these ideas and techniques to help conjure in people's minds different images of a much more diverse array of people who are technologists and tech entrepreneurs and users of tech, etc., would be incredible. So now we've come to the part of the agenda where we're going to open the floor for any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you. Straight ahead, I already see a hand up, so we might see if we have a round and we'll come back to the panel, but please, sir, go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. It's the opportunity to speak. Panelists, delegates, dignitaries, and NGOs, thank you so much. My name is Valentin Camano. I'm a youth advocate that supports regarding collective engaging materials as well as technologies as well abroad in Bangladesh for Fahim Hassan for Teen Join Bangla. So everything is set off. He has volunteers. He has everything set out, the structure, the framework. But the thing that is missing is just the educational material and resources. How can we partner up to engage these educational materials for rural young girls to close the gender gap? That's just my question. Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much. That might be a good one to come to UNICEF for, and also we can add something from an Equals perspective as well. Are there any other questions or comments at this point before we turn to our colleagues? Not at this stage. Do you want to go first and talk about, like, from a younger woman perspective, and maybe particularly young women who are in more rural areas? Is this an area that UNICEF has been doing some work, or do you have educational materials that might be useful?
Educational materials for digital skills particularly, yes. And in UNICEF, we are in over 150 countries all over the globe. So different countries have different priorities and different programs in different languages and targeting different populations. Our global goal is that every girl access 12 years of education and is equipped with the necessary skills for accessing decent job and for having good health and life outcomes overall. So in many countries, we partner with civil society, with different organizations to make sure that the most marginalized girls, mostly rural girls in some cases, have access to secondary education and to digital skills as well. So I'm happy to continue the conversation at a later time offline, so I can learn more about that exciting work that you brought up right now.
Great. And I would just also add, from an Equals perspective, if you go to equals.org, you'll find information about the Skills Coalition. And they've done some really interesting work as well, not only pointing to different kinds of skills-based programs, particularly for digital skills and complementary skills that exist around the world, but you'll also find what works, what doesn't work, so good practices around how to have the most effective programs. And at equals.org/action map, you can actually find examples of skills initiatives, but also access and leadership initiatives all around the world. So there may be some useful resources there as well. Are there any other questions or comments? Otherwise, yes, please.
Gap when we talk about just access and internet is probably coming more from certain countries, maybe also like South Asia is at the center of it right now. So in the same continent, do we have some say successful stories from countries who have also developing countries who have emerged out of it in general digital gap and also in terms of STEM education? Because when we see like Philippines, etc., some companies have been saying that the girls are even doing better, women are doing better at all levels of education there. So I mean, what are some country level takeaways that we have from there? Thank you.
We'll give a number of the panelists a chance to come back on that. I would just add that one of the things that is so exciting, and even just listening to each of the speakers all pointing to just fantastic examples that can make a difference, is how do we connect the dots and scale up? Because while we do know what works, there's still so many more people to address. And that's one of the ideas also behind Equals, is how can we come together to just reach the massive amount of scale that we need to reach. But Revi, do you have any specific examples, maybe from Women Connect Challenge? Maybe you want to preface it by, because you didn't mention Women Connect Challenge really in your remarks, and it's so on point to this discussion this afternoon. So how about you start by telling us about that, and then if you know of any examples, maybe you've got some organizations who are from South Asia who've already participated. If there's any examples, perhaps you could draw on from there, and then we might go down the line to hear from other panelists. Not red. Now you. Red is good.
Red is good?
In this context.
I'm so confused. All right. Also, people always say, I don't think we actually do know what works necessarily in gender digital divide stuff. I think those of us in the know that do this all the time knows what works. But I have been asked once a month for the last 20 years, well, what if we just gave women pink phones? I mean, there are questions like that still come up and still come around. And yes, we can laugh and we can shake our heads, but it is a rarity to find those people that, we're believers. We know the data. The data have been the same since the early 2000s on, why there are reasons for the gender digital divide. I mean, it's the same barriers that our colleague at GSMA so nicely articulated, and that everybody up here is. And people go, well, there's no new research in gender digital divide stuff since 2000, 2003, Afghan higher, those people, like, yeah, it's the same issues. We're not doing any better. Our gap is still widening. So we have a terrible job with disseminating this information. And then we get questions like, well, what if we just gave women pink phones? So I think so the Women Connect Challenge, as my ungraceful segue here, was really born out of my frustration around the lack of looking at social norms as the root cause of the gender digital divide. Because it's easy to say, oh, sure, it's time, it's cost, it's this, it's that. Those all have their underlying roots in social norms, but it's easier to offer subsidized internet. It's easier to provide ICT training, which is what a lot of technology companies and foundations do, et cetera. It's an easy checkbox. You do get a lot of attention. People do fill the rooms. They are curious about this thing called technology. But again, we're certainly not getting anywhere down to like putting the last first in terms of accessing digital content, digital services, and providing the opportunities that digital can provide. So the Women Connect Challenge was really born from the fact that we say social norms, but what really are these social norms in these communities? Because they've been very different 3 kilometers down the road as they are from where you're standing right now. So who even knows what those social norms are in this one village in Bihar versus this one village in Chhattisgarh? It's easy to look at like, oh, they're all poor Indian women. Okay, well, they're very different poor Indian women in very different contexts. The second thing being, we have to work with those in power. If you go back to my original point, which always is, women are offline for so many reasons because people want to keep them offline. So, working with religious leaders, mother-in-laws, husbands, educators, employers, and trying to understand again, why do they not think that online is a woman's place? Is it just a safety issue? We're working right now in northern Nigeria, one of the Women Connect projects, with clerics in the region to understand why they've been talking about the immorality of the internet and how, they in the past they've said that women can't use phones because they're immoral. Okay, what's the Quranic justification for that? Let's get in these conversations with scholars and leaders and families and husbands and wives and sons and daughters, dads and daughters sitting together and discussing this, and maybe they'll decide it isn't right for their family. But what we're actually finding is that 100% of the people that have been part of this project have actually changed their behavior and their perspective on what ICT can bring not only to women, but the family unit and the community as a whole, if it's done within sort of a safe, discussed context. So really, Women Connect Project was all about working with very small, hyper-local organizations that understood the cultural norms, understood the value of closing the gender-digital divide, and then coming up with the use cases for that. In some cases, that's things like using interactive voice recording in Western Tanzania just to help women understand, not necessarily teaching digital skills over IVR, but more talking about what this digital thing is. What is an internet versus an email address versus, what is search? What is WhatsApp? Just so they could get over the confidence barrier, so that if they did go to a training, maybe they'd want to go to a training now if they understood and was a little more familiar with the terminology. We've got the Northern Nigeria project, the project in Mali that's working specifically, as I mentioned before, my love of text-free user interfaces and alternative inputs for illiterate populations, working with a group of, illiterate women in Bamako slums to do a voice-based, Bambara-based social network that, yes, is perfect for what they need to accomplish online, which is getting health information, selling their products, et cetera, but kind of rooted in that dignity and ease of design. Everybody's using it because it's just a pain to type into these things. It's really a pain. Exactly. Look what happens. You draw papers. So you have everybody from, well-off people to the poorest of the poor using this. It's not like you have a digital food stamp app. I think a lot of our applications actually look like they're meant for poor people, which is not an encouraging thing. So Women Connect was really all about trying to look at those social norms that build those, that perpetuate those barriers, and then finding our ways into them. In terms of STEM and ICT, there's definitely pockets of huge successes. And if you look at India, for an example, there's these great orgs doing great things, and maybe parity in one college of girls in STEM, young women in STEM education, and then you go 4 states over, and it's like going back 400 years in time. And so I think that, again, you have these successes. They are limited. The scale is hard because these organizations don't necessarily do. I think the Marcom is a fabulous example. NGOs or think tanks, et cetera, we're not good at getting our message out. We're not good at marketing. We don't have PR budgets. We might have one comms intern during the summer, and that's it. And they need to be put on something else. So I think a lot of it has to do with dissemination. And for the organizations that are getting it right, let's go. What I'm hoping with not all the Women Connect projects are going great. Some are fantastic. Some are going a little off the rails. The ones that are going well, I want to take back to organizations like Microsoft and IBM and Intel and World Bank and others that have really reduced their funding in the gender digital divide over the last few years. The apex of funding was around 2007, 2008, about 2012. Everyone was funding girls and women in tech training. And then it's gotten smaller and smaller and smaller because the return on investment has been so low. We're not seeing a whole bunch of women from northern Kenya becoming technology professionals. And that shouldn't have been the goal. And that's an unrealistic, gap. But to go back and say, look, now, if you're on the bad side, the wrong side of the digital divide, now you can't access any of this development content across health, education, all these sectors that are moving towards this. It's critical, you high-tech companies, you ICT efforts at think tanks and foundations and bilaterals to re-engage in this space. Here's the 4 things from Women Connect, the 5 things from UNICEF and Equals and other things. This is what you need to do, because your core competency is not in social norms. My dream would be to have this great roadshow to the technology companies, to bilats, et cetera, and just be like, you've got to re-engage. We don't want you to lose money and, shareholder interest in this, but there are some amazing ways to do this. And this is the stuff that works. We've been through the pain. We know the pain. I've worked on projects where, women's lives are at stake if they have someone's phone number that their husband or family members can't identify in that. So we really have to take this stuff seriously and then and work together to get the best practices out to those that have their big money in this space.
Fantastic. Yes, it's incredibly urgent. Other colleagues on the panel, anything you would like to add in response to that question? Any other examples, maybe other ones you haven't already shared, or any examples particularly, say, from South Asia, etc.?
So I would like to add, in terms of STEM, that sometimes global statistics are misunderstood or misinterpreted. It is a fact that globally, and especially in East Asia Pacific and South Asia, girls are doing better and better in math and in science in general, in STEM. What you don't see with that statistic is that South Asia is one of the regions with the largest number of out-of-school girls in the world. So again, once girls are given the opportunity to learn, to access a school, to access skilling opportunities, they really run with it. They take advantage of those opportunities, but then they hit a second wall, and is the transitions to employment. You see in India, there's more and more women, sometimes outnumbering men in universities, in all sorts of disciplines. And the transitions to employment are very low. So what families see is that we are now convinced about girls' education. Our mindsets have changed. But what's this for? The return of investment is very low. So then when they say, okay, so it's good for girls to be educated, to be good mothers, to be good wives, to stay healthy, but not necessarily to be financially independent, to be leaders, to be empowered. So I think it's important that you brought up that point, but we have a lot of work to do in demystifying STEM. Also, you have seen, we are talking more and more in this year about the learning crisis all over the world. And we are framing that discussion in terms of literacy and numeracy outcomes. Science education, STEM education is often seen as a privilege for children and adolescents in wealthier countries. When we could reframe the conversation, we have a lot of work to do together to communicate that STEM, digital skills, digital literacy is a way of learning, a way of becoming literate, to understand the mathematics, to understand the world around us, to be functional, to be empowered. So that will be it on my end.
Diana, are you still with us?
I am actually, yes.
Is there anything you wanted to add in terms of the question that was asked? Maybe any other examples that you saw in the context of this report? Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I would say just in terms of South Asia, what we tend to find when we look at the kind of mobile internet statistic is that actually there has been a huge, I guess, wave of kind of just sort of mobile internet spread. And I think actually as a region, it's the kind of leading region in terms of using mobile to actually access the internet. And if we look at the examples of India and Myanmar, you know, a lot of women have actually hugely benefited from more commercial forces at play. So specifically in India, we found that between, I think, 2014 and 2017, there was a 26 percentage point increase in the affordability of mobile internet. However, despite that, we also see that in I think 40% of rural India, there's only 2% of internet users. So obviously the growth is not spreading equally, benefiting everyone. However, you know, there have been great strides made in terms of actually getting women online and getting them to use the services. And similarly, Myanmar, again, very commercial force, but because of the liberalization of the market, the actual country went from being, you know, maybe having 11% of population online to now, you know, being probably the second highest of the Asian countries in terms of a number of internet subscribers. And we know the kind of the positives and the negatives and the Facebook implications. But, the fact is that, women are getting increased access to mobile services and to the internet. And now what we also found is we tend to run consumer survey where we, go directly to people's houses, and we run a survey every year, and we ask them about the benefits to accessing mobile internet. And we found that particularly in South Asia, the two key barriers were literacy and skill and the relevance. So I think that's something that definitely, policymakers as well as the NGOs should take into account in devising products that seem to be more relevant, back to the question that was earlier raised. And we also found that actually, particularly in South Asia, that the women are perceived as being kind of more vulnerable to corruption by the internet. So specifically meaning that usage of mobile internet could put the reputation of the family at risk. So it's those sorts of, on the one hand, very kind of, economic, commercial, kind of trickle-down effects of the kind of global markets versus the kind of, socio-cultural norm barriers that we're discussing today, and how they clash is actually, is actually the symptom of that is that, yes, actually in those markets, women are benefiting, but, at the same time, we do still feel these digital gender divides are not closing. So that's kind of a bit of an overview of what we've seen in terms of the digits and in terms of trends.
Thanks so much, Diana. Lisa or Dan, did you want to add anything on this particular point?
Yeah, I was going to add actually one thing that maybe we can emphasize again is including men in the conversation, including men in the programs. One thing that ProMujer aims to do is have programs that are addressing women's, digital literacy, but also congruently having programs that are addressing men's kind of machismo, cultural norms that they've been abiding by. So congruently, we try and address both, even though, as the reports were showing, courses that are focused with just women tend to do better for those women. But if we introduce courses that are congruently also addressing the norms that men are currently having in the region and changing that to be more accepting of women in technology, that can also be kind of a dual force that increases the impact. One thing that we did that I want to mention is that we created a Learn app, which was like a soccer game for young boys in the community in Argentina. And that embedded in that were ways to rewrite the cultural norms in Argentina for those young boys. So while their mothers are at ProMujer empowering themselves and building their businesses, their young boys can also be, playing soccer, but also, opening up their minds to what is a more positive, sort of less toxic masculinity can be. Yeah.
Dan?
So maybe just two things. One is building on this idea that there is again a barrier around the norms. I mean, just an interesting data point, I think, from the survey I talked about earlier. 1 in 3 men and women who were asked in the 10-country survey that we did with Kantar said that if jobs are scarce, men should be prioritized to work over women. Now, you can extrapolate from that a basic set of norms and views as to that transition to employment that you were talking about, Isabel. So I think that when we're talking about what works, again, that importance of putting the attention to the norms and the stereotypes is really key there. And I think that we neglect that very often. We invest a lot. And Revi, you were talking about the ROI there. I do think sometimes this is a mistake we make. We invest a lot in training and capacitating, but not in those things that stop a trained and capacitated woman from actually achieving her potential or taking the opportunities she may want to talk. I think another thing that maybe, and I don't know, others may see this differently, but I think in the traditional sort of gender equality and development community, so those of us who for a living try and promote gender equal development and women's empowerment, I'm not sure that we are, as a group, as a constituency, if you like, as quick to leverage ICT solutions as maybe some other parts of the development community are. And I think if our development programming is not putting technology into the hands of women as a solution for gender equality challenges, as much as it could, then we're missing a trick, we're missing an opportunity. We have let's give you a couple of examples. I can't think of one, sorry, from South Asia, but that's probably my lack of knowledge rather than because it doesn't exist. But you know, we have a program in Africa looking at women farmers, 80% of the agricultural labor force of Africa. And you know, if you think about the sorts of traditional interventions that have been done looking at women in agriculture, they're not always sort of historically or traditionally technology based. What we've done with the Buy for Women platform and app is put an enterprise resource platform into the hands of women farmers that has climate information, technology information, standard ERP functionalities for them to run their own business. Also connecting them with buyers who may want to buy in advance that allows them to use the upfront money to buy a dryer so they can get better return on their crops, etc. So things like that. And also, you know, a thing which I think it's an example of the thing, you know, people don't necessarily jump to. We're the biggest, I mean, it's not a huge area of work, but we're the biggest provider of cash for work programming for Syrian refugee women in Jordan, in the Zatari camps. And there are a number of issues around providing cash assistance directly to women, but we've been trying, and it's got some good aspects and less good aspects, to use blockchain token technology, basically, so that the women can get money through a mobile app and use it at POS, at point of sale. So you know, it's jumping a little bit more quickly to saying what's the technology solution that puts technology in women's hands, because that has value in its own right, but also I think potentially bigger knock-on effects. So again, something that we might be a little quicker than I think maybe traditionally. I don't know, maybe other people see it differently, but having worked in this area for a while, I feel that we could be better at that.
So we're almost at the end, and I thought what we could do just to finish off is perhaps each speaker wants to leave us with either one takeaway. It can be a reinforcement of a point that they made, or if there's another point that occurred to them that they would now like to add. And so I will start to give everyone a chance to think. And I feel that a key theme that has come through is how important this theme is, in particular to leaving no one behind and to reaching the furthest behind first, which are obviously really key concepts for the SDGs. So that's my point. And maybe just one other thing I would add, which is that the power of connecting the dots and working together, bringing different expertise and disciplines together, I feel there's another theme that's come through here, whether it be the marketing, etc., or the advertising, whether it be the technology and the gender equality and the anthropology. So which of the speakers would like to go next with their last takeaway point or final addition that they would like to make? Yes, Lisa, go ahead.
I think often about whenever we're approaching these sort of development issues, one thing to think about is to listen. I think we do a lot of work in terms of understanding things from a top-down perspective, but a lot of the women we're serving and the women we hope to, improve their lives, they also have a key to the answer on what would help them in their own lives. I don't think we take enough time sometimes to open up their space for them to give their input and be co-creators in some of these programs. So I think the emphasis on listening is always key.
Wonderful. Okay, who's next? Diana, you can also give a yell. Do I have to volunteer somebody? Okay, Dan.
Thanks, Ursula. I think I'll go ahead.
Oh, you do? Please. Okay.
I think what really stuck with me was what Erin said at the beginning about the power of ICT to help us create new norms. And I think it's so powerful in a society where digital natives are 2 years old and they can use their iPad before they can walk. And then what kind of ties to that quite nicely is that stat from UNICEF. Actually, the little girls are not getting the same access opportunities. And for me, that's the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge when we talk about gender norms and ICT. It's about the new generation that's on TikTok or whatever the newest app is, and that has so much power to use that technology, but at the same time, that needs to be given access equally and fairly.
Fantastic. And thanks again also for being with us so late in your evening. It really shows your dedication. So we really appreciate that. Dan.
My pleasure.
And I mean, I know it's probably a bit repetitive, but the power of partnership, and you mentioned it. I think we just have to recognise that we're not necessarily super good at changing minds, and other people do a lot of it and are ready to work with us. And so there's just a huge potential there. You know, the things we've been talking about, to lean on others to work with us on this, that we just need to explore, starting from the premise that this isn't necessarily something that only we can do. You know, so, thank you.
Definitely lots of potential there, and we have to have a follow-up conversation after this. I'm all excited now. Ingrid, do you want to go next?
Sure.
You have the last bit, Remy.
So, education is powerful too. Education has the power to change minds, to change hearts. We need to start early. And for that, we need to advocate amongst us, those who work in development, that quality education goes beyond simple literacy and numeracy, and access to digital tools is part of it, and advocate with governments also to open this access for all children, especially the most marginalized.
Thank you. Revi.
Everything everybody else has said, absolutely. The other thing, just to hold us accountable, I mean, Ursula, the power of ITU equals and your own charisma to pull us all together is fabulous, but at the end of the day, we're still very, very siloed. I tried to have a workshop once last spring where we would everybody that worked in this space that I knew, we could get together and share donor lists, share donor names. You're getting funded through there, we're getting funded through here, we're not getting funded, you are. What's the secret? Can we go about this in a better way? Even my good friends wouldn't name names. We're so siloed, there's so little money in this space, there's so many misunderstandings of it that I had no idea UNICEF is doing a bot. Well, we're doing a bot too, and lots of places are doing bots. So we just have to keep connecting each other and pushing, you know, the funders and the silos that are inevitable and part of the structure of international development and international funding in this space. We still just have to push ourselves more to demand more from each other and a larger research and funding agenda.
I think that's so critical, and I think that's why, among other reasons, why we have SDG 17 on partnership, just recognising how critical that is, that if we want to achieve the SDGs, which we all do, it's going to be absolutely vital that we completely have a step change in the degree of collaboration and partnership that we even currently have. So on that note, please join me in thanking our wonderful speakers here and also online. Thanks, Diana.
And thank you.
And thanks for the great questions, and to you all for joining us on a Friday afternoon or evening, as the case may be, or in some parts of the world, morning. So wherever you are, enjoy the rest of it. Thanks.